Good morning. I want to take off from where we left off yesterday. Yesterday, I was just a little bit rambling about things that I had discovered over the weekend. People who weren't putting in enough effort was basically what my rant was about. And that was a little bit disturbing to me. So today, I've given you a very, very unsexy title called The Principle of Sufficient Reason. But I want to take that and marry it to yesterday's conversation in a very positive way. In a very positive way. And that is this: everything that exists has a reason for existing. If this exists, this is what the principle of sufficient reason is. If X exists, then there must be a reason for X existing. It has a sufficient reason that it's there. So that's way more complicated than it has to be. And that principle has been applied to all kinds of things. It was the number one thing that I taught when I taught school. It was, in fact, kind of in a response to a question that Don asked yesterday. There is a path that ends up in discovering the answers to the questions that you see. There's a path that goes there. There's always a path that goes there. And the principle of sufficient reasoning gives me an understanding what that path is. And the path is this: that I have to go from something that I know to something that I don't know. There's a path that goes between those two. I go from something that I already know to something that I don't know. Now, one of the biggest challenges that I have ever seen in all of time has been translating a language from one thing to something else. When the big secret to World War II and the victories that we had in the Japanese theater was the fact that we had the Navajo code talkers, because Navajo had never been a written language. And so how do we translate, how would the Japanese, or anyone else for that matter, be able to figure out how do they go from something that they know to something that they don't know? That was the mystery of that, and it gave us an edge in World War II. We've had histories replete with those kinds of things, going from the known to the unknown. Now, I've known several people who've been translators. Not several. I've known a handful of people. I've gone to school with people who were later translators, and that's a really good question. We'll talk about that one maybe tomorrow. But what they do is they take something that people know. All right, they take something that they know, and they apply, and then they create a path from what they know to what they don't know. And this became really obvious to me in a training session several years ago. I asked, "So do you want to know how we got there?" And the person said, "No, I don't have any, I don't care. I don't want to know how we got there. I just want it done." Well, what you should have done was hired somebody. You should have just hired somebody to do it for you, and then you wouldn't know. That's because it's going from something that we know. And if I don't know something, kind of in response to Don's question here, if I don't know something, if there's something in the world that I don't know, I have to take a careful look at the things that I already know. There may be something missing in my understanding. There may be something that I need to dig a little deeper on in my current understanding so that it makes it possible for me to go to the unknown, so I can get from where I am to where I need to go. I see this a lot when I have my grandson with me, or I'm talking to one of my granddaughters on the phone. And we're having a discussion, and I'm trying to share I'm always challenging them, pressing them to know more. And the way that you do that is you take something that they are already familiar with. One of the 7 laws of learning is you go from the known to the unknown. And that path is so important. And I would challenge them with something that they don't know, and try to, and then connect the dots to the things that they do know. So, honey, if this is the outcome that you want, then what do you know that relates to that? I mean, we do that when we teach kids math. 1, 2, 3. We start to give them something that they can relate to, right? And the purpose of that is that they're connecting something that is conceptual, like a number, to the number of objects, which is something that they're familiar with. Okay, so we always are in this process of going from the known, something that we know, that has sufficient reason for its existence, and going to something that we don't know. There's a process involved in that. The process is always important. It's always important. But it comes from, there's not a mystery out there. I can remember one time getting called on the carpet for something. And I said, look, before we go too far down the road on this, I want you to understand something. There are some people who believe that things happen by accident. I don't happen to be one of them. The people who think that you just all of a sudden, something happens, I'm not one of those people. And so if I don't just think things magically happen, I see this a lot when people are trying to work with software. It just did this. Nope. Whatever it did, I promise you whatever it did it for a reason. I can just assure you of that there's a reason why that happened. So we got to find out what the reason was. And usually that reason has to do with your understanding. If I have an understanding here of what I already know, then I can move from what I already know to something that I don't yet know. Trying to solve a big problem for a client yesterday. And we were looking at things. I said, pause right there. I just need to take a look at that for a minute and see what I'm not seeing. I need a better understanding of where we are so I can get us to where we want to go. And once I had a better understanding of where we were, looking at the things that I knew, but was kind of overlooking, once I had a better understanding of that, it was really easy to go from there to the unknown. Oh, well, that's going to make that work. Okay. So back to my illustration, I called on the carpet. I said, there's some people who think things happen by accident. There are people who think that things happen by design. The people who think things happen by design will follow. The people who think things happen by accident are mad at me all the time. And quite honestly, I don't care, because things don't happen by accident. You go from what you know to what you don't know. And if you can't ever get over here, there's a problem with what you have over here. Always, always and forever, the problem is on what you know. We should be in a world, there's never been a time in the history of man when more information has been available to us. But if we don't master the information that we have, we'll never get further down the road. Don's question is this, and I may take tomorrow and discuss this. Why do we never get an answer when we're knocking at the door? It's a really good question. Sometimes, and I have a whole training program that revolves around one thing, and that is that if you ask the right questions, the answers appear. If you're knocking at the door and you're not getting the answer that you want, the short answer to that is that there's a secret knock, and you're not knocking the secret knock. There's a passcode knock that you have to knock just right, and it'll happen. Okay? I jumped into my head to all these things are being connected, jumped in my head about the speakeasy and the secret knock, and that's a whole nother story for another day. But what I want you to see today is that there's a very simple principle of thought. When I taught school, I always made sure that all my students understood this, that the only way that you'll know something that you don't currently know is you'll use the tools that you currently know. And if you're not getting here, then you need to focus more attention on the things that you know. Two very simple principles. You go from the known to the unknown because there's a sufficient reason behind everything that exists. And we look for those. When we're training people, we look for those. What do you currently know? I had the privilege of spending a little bit of time in various industries when I was growing up. And I've used everything I've learned from every one of those to help me to know things that I would have never dreamed I would have known. extremely important. The law of sufficient reason, you go from the known to the unknown, but you're building upon the things that you know. Something as simple as mathematics, something as complex as literature and language, you always go from what you know to what you don't know. And the path that connects the two of those is a path called reason. It's a path called logic. It's a path that makes sense once you understand what the path is. Yeah, I know. I had to sneak a little comment about speakeasy in there, Mark, for those of us who still know what that term means. All right. Thank you for joining me on this Tuesday morning. Have a wonderful, wonderful day and the rest of your week. I'll be back here tomorrow. We'll continue with this same kind of topic, and we'll pick up where we leave off today. But make sure to share this if you have somebody who you think might benefit from it.